Hey everybody, what's going on? Helmite here, bringing you another video from Grab the Lantern today. Today I wanted to give a little bit more thought to the whole burst or be bursted meta that everyone is talking about, and the concept of damage creep and why generally everyone believes that is a thing currently. Because, spoiler alert, I don't actually think that damage creep is currently a thing. I don't think that we have that much to worry about from burst or be bursted and all these highlight reel plays going around of people saying, oh, look how much higher damage is than it was in seasons previous, and linking to a play of a 5.5 item casted at 20 minutes in the game, one-shotting somebody who's equally squishy. All of that I think is super circumstantial. I think it's a very easy complaint to make. I think a lot of people can say it and easily say, oh, well, I got killed by an assassin in my last game, therefore damage must be too high, without bothering to think that, hey, maybe that assassin had 14 kills and that's why he one-shot you because you're an AD carry and that's what he does. But anyways, I basically think all of that is fake. I don't think that there's any such thing as burst or be bursted meta. I think that the biggest thing that we're suffering from is the period of time where Riot is not in the office, not making any balance changes, and that leads to a lot of players immediately having issues with the current meta, issues with current balance, and giving voice to them, and because they find nothing but silence, because Riot aren't in the office, they're not giving any feedback, that immediately translates into, well, Riot doesn't care, this problem is never going to change ever, and wow, things suck. And we did kind of have this last year as well when Camille was released. If you remember, Camille came out, Riot left the office, and Camille ended up being horrendously broken, so much so that she had something like an 80% ban rate at almost all levels of play because no one wanted to see that champion. That was another situation where people were screaming and railing against Riot and saying, how could you leave the game in such a state? But at the end of the day, it really wasn't that big of a deal. Riot came back, they nerfed her, and we were all fine. Now, in general, this is kind of what I want to take a look at and talk about today, and to why this sort of situation doesn't exist. Because first and foremost, remember that it is preseason. So this does mean that Riot is out of the office, just like they were last year, as I mentioned before, and balance updates aren't happening. So that means that any problems that we have do last for significantly longer amounts of time because we can't count on Riot actually showing up to change them, unfortunately. That's just kind of the way of things. Now, this is very disappointing, and I think it does lead to a lot of players being upset and angry, and it does make sense, but at the same time, I think that even just taking a couple seconds to remember that, hey, this isn't going to be the game going forward, can do wonders to keep your mental intact. The other thing is that because it's preseason, because Riot are out of the office, and especially because of a few other factors that I'll talk about in a minute, players aren't taking games as seriously as they did during the season, especially because rank doesn't really matter at the moment. It might affect your seeding for the next season, but it really doesn't. So you have a lot of players playing ranked as if it were normals, and a lot of players playing normals as if nothing mattered at all because, well, it's just normals, it's not ranked, it's preseason, who cares? So what this means is that when players don't care about a game, a couple things happen. First and foremost, there tend to be higher scoring games because players on either side aren't playing as safely as they do before, because who cares if you win or lose, it's just a game and all I want to do is have fun. So if you don't ward, if you push up too far, if you make all these sorts of mistakes, it doesn't really matter because you're just playing for fun at this point. But it does lead to a lot more high scoring games and does lead to a lot more games where players are dying a lot more often because they're just kind of walking in the lane and dying and not really caring about it. It also means that a lot more damage oriented champions get played because, let's face it, most players find high damage dealing characters to be more fun than low damage dealing characters. You barely see champions like Maokai or Shen or Malphite or even juggernauts like Dr. Mundo populating the game anymore because players just aren't playing them right now. It's preseason, who cares? I don't really care about winning. I want to play something I can have fun with. So you see a lot more champions like Talon and Nocturne and Kassadin and all sorts of champions that are designed by default to have high damage against squishies, but who are squishy themselves. What this means, however, is that you have a lot of these champions on both teams. In fact, you'll sometimes see team compositions where you have a Kassadin and a Talon and a Nocturne and a Zed and a Camille, and that's a lot of damage and a lot of squishy targets for that damage to go onto, with almost no one who's capable of mitigating the damage, either by being tanky themselves or at helping deal with the damage in another way, such as enchanters that can either stop the damage from going through, crowd control attackers, anything of that regard. Especially because, again, preseason, I want to play damage in the support slot. I'm going to play a champion like, let's say, Xerath or Ziggs or even Karthus, for example, as a support because I just want to do damage. I don't really care about supporting. I just want to get more damage in. So that means you have essentially 10 damage characters on a game. Maybe a little bit less, kind of depends on who you're playing with, but essentially that's what you're looking with. So now when you have games where players are not really taking it too seriously and they're dying a lot, and all of these high damage characters that really can get snowballing if they get even the slightest bit ahead, you end up with a situation where you can have a 22-0 Kassadin one-shotting you at 22 minutes into the game because he's so incredibly tanky. So that's one of the things you should be kind of thinking about, and one of the things we should be paying attention to when thinking about the current meta, because it's not that the meta shifted to be burst or be bursted, or that Riot want more damage because of hashtag LCS plays or anything like that. It's simply because everyone is playing damage, and they're all squishy targets running around for that damage to go onto. Of course, everyone's going to get killed when no one is playing a tank or no one is playing any kind of champion that can help mitigate damage. So that's sort of why we're in the situation we're at. And so I think it's kind of funny then when people start complaining there's too much damage in the game, but then you kind of look at what they've been playing and it's literally all been damage dealing champions. Or they complain no one plays tanks anymore. You could play tanks instead of playing all the damage dealing top laners that you do, but you play damage dealing top laners and then get one shot, and then you built full damage and you wonder why you got one shot. So I think that's one of the situations where we're at right now, and why it feels like there's a high damage meta, why it feels like Riot wants a high damage meta, because I doubt they do. I think it doesn't behoove Riot to have nothing but damage running around in a game, because you lose track of having structured team fights, you lose track of having clear initiations, you lose track of having actual structured team compositions. If the only thing that mattered is damage, well, the game would fall apart very quickly, because it just wouldn't be fun even for pros, I gotta think. So at the end of the day, though, it's not that Riot doesn't care, it's that they're literally not in the office to deal with the problem, first and foremost. But when they do come back, that Riot want to make sure that they're properly evaluating the situation and reacting to it accordingly, as opposed to just saying, damage is too high, just nerf it, because that can lead to other problems. Remember, not enough damage is just as problematic as too much damage. So anyways, moving on to fixes for the situation, because even if the burst or be bursted meta doesn't exist as I posited it does, that still leads to a situation where it sucks and we don't like how the game feels. So how do we fix that? First and foremost, pro play will be returning to the game. How does this help, do you ask? Pro play almost always ends up affecting the casual play meta, because even if you never watch a game of professional League of Legends in your life, lots of people do. And these people will see players playing things like, let's say, Sion top lane, or Mundo in the jungle, or any number of crazy things, and whatever the meta might have happen when pro play resumes. Now, what this does mean that'll happen is that we'll end up with a situation where pros are playing these champions, people are seeing pros play these champions and say, wow, they must be really strong because the pros are playing them, and start playing them in their own solo queue games, and therefore everything kind of trickles down to the rest of the player base as players realize this guy is really, really good, we should be playing this champion. So because of this, eventually these changes will bleed down into casual play and affect how often you see full damage team compositions. Because, spoiler alert, I don't think pros are going to be playing the same kind of compositions we see in our solo queue games. I just don't think it's going to happen. I think that there are plenty of enchanter supports that are very good. I think there are plenty of tank champions that are very good. And I think just in general, the way pros structure their team compositions are very different from how we do, because they don't have to worry about playing champions just for fun. They play champions to win. They play champions for team composition. They play champions to make sure that their team has a higher chance of winning, even if the player doesn't necessarily have fun. So I think that will have a good effect at changing this whole quote-unquote burst or be bursted meta. The other thing would be Riot intervention changing things. I doubt damage needs to be toned down, as I've said, but they can and likely will address particularly egregious outliers as they return to the office. 9.1 is coming out this week, so the odds of new PB update are soon, and it's likely that Riot, even if they haven't been in the office, have been keeping track of the sort of damage and player complaints, and will be looking into that when they return to office, and probably already have a good idea of what changes they would like to make, if any at all. So we do have that going for us, and we will have to see how that actually goes. Finally, if you really don't like this whole meta, you can change your own habits. First of all, if you want less damage, you can always pick less damage. There is no rule that says you have to play damage if everyone else is playing damage, and playing things like tanks, enchanters, control mages, all of that can help you curb damage that you see in your own games. If you're a tank, you can be the one initiating fights, locking down enemy burst champions, and killing them before they have an opportunity to kill your team, or just being durable enough that they can't one-shot you, and if they're dumping all their damage onto you, your own damage dealers can deal with them. The other thing you can do, and very easily do on any champion, is to just play safer. This prevents snowbally champions from snowballing, and therefore prevents them from one-shotting you, because, spoiler alert, if these snowbally champions don't snowball, they don't have any damage, and they shouldn't hit one-shot potential. Now, obviously, they can roam, they can help other lanes and still get ahead, but if you're, at the very least, not giving them lots of kills, if you're providing them with enough respect, then you won't have to worry about it as much. And in general, I think that's the best thing you can do. Even if you're in the jungle, just not contesting certain scuttle crabs that you know are going to be there, seeding areas of your jungle, warding your jungle to make sure if they do invade that you can play safely. All those kinds of things can help you, even if you're in the jungle, play safer and avoid snowballing, let's say a snowballing jungler like Nocturne or somebody like that. So in general, those are kind of my thoughts on this whole concept of damage creep and burst or be bursted and all this stuff that's going around on the forums lately. But I'd love to hear your thoughts on everything. Go ahead and let me know down in the comment section below what you think on all this, especially if you think I am wrong. Would love to hear your guys' thoughts. If you enjoyed the video today, go ahead and leave a like. And if you really enjoyed the video, consider subscribing. I upload a video every Monday, Friday, and on patch days as well. And if you're looking for more Grab the Lantern content, you can check out my blog, which is linked down in the description. I upload an article just about each and every single day for your enjoyment. Once again, thank you guys so very much for watching. I do appreciate it. And now I'll talk to you all later.